generation facility is not a second principal use. The property which is the subject of the application is located at 37 Dampman Road, being tax parcel number 22-8-8.3-E. The property is owned by the Northwestern Chester County Municipal Authority and is located in the township's agricultural A zoning district. Before proceeding any further, I want to ask if there is anyone present who wishes to be recognized as a party to the proceeding. Party status will give you the right to call witnesses, to cross-examine other witnesses, and to appeal the decision of the zoning hearing board. The applicant will be recognized as a party. The township is always automatically recognized as a party. So I see the applicant's representatives here. Do you want to enter your appearance on behalf of?
Sure, may we come up?
Yeah, please do.
Good evening. Nate Fox from Overmeyer on behalf of the applicant. We have two witnesses with us this evening. Steve Cohn from St. Carpet Capital and our engineer, Chris Sespico. May I have them sworn in?
Well, let's finish with finding out if we have any parties here tonight. So, is there any other person here tonight who wishes to be recognized as a party to this proceeding? Yes, ma'am. Can you identify yourself?
Yeah, my name is Aborgast.
What's your first name, please?
Aborgast.
Can you spell your last name?
Can I just ask a question quick?
Oh, yes.
I don't necessarily need to be party status. I'm not within the amount of feet to, I didn't get a notice. I just wanted to ask a couple questions beforehand. I don't need to be like on a party set. And it's nothing like, it's just some questions. It's not anything.
All right. Well, if your questions are something that you would like the board to consider, we need to evaluate whether you can be a party.
Okay, so I live on Windswept Lane in Honey Brook, so Dampman Road. I go up Dampman Road every day. It's through our development. And I live back, you probably know where Dr. Frankel's farm was, the tree farm. But I know that some people, I think, were mailed notices, but I'm not close enough to have a notice.
Okay, well, let me first of all again ask you to spell your last name.
Sure, it's Arbogast, A-R-B-E-G-A-S-T.
Okay, and what is your actual address on Windswept Lane?
70.
And what would you estimate is the distance from your home to the property where the project is proposed to be located?
Well, it's a quarter mile from my house to like Windswept Lane up to Dampman Road. And then Dampman Road, then probably from there up to the sewage treatment plant, I would say is another quarter mile. Does that sound right? So a mile or a half a mile? That's about right, because that's probably, yeah.
I'm going to ask the applicant's counsel if he has any thoughts about the eligibility of this individual to be a party to this matter.
If I may, Mr. Arbogast, on a legal grounds, I'd object to party status, but I'm more than happy to allow her to ask questions either now or during testimony. I just don't think the threshold from the NBC for a person to be granting a party status.
Are you thinking that 1/2 mile is not close enough to the site?
Because of the limited impacts that this use would have, is there a specific impact that you're concerned about?
I'm just concerned about the traffic, like the types of vehicles that'll be going up and down Dampman, and just like, would those vehicles be going up at a certain time? Because as you guys know, Dampman's very narrow. So would you be bringing the solar panels? I would imagine have pretty big trucks that come in, and I don't know how often and then dump trucks and that type of thing. I don't know how often they would need to go up and down. So I was just worried about traffic and then,
So your concern is about traffic?
yeah, and then if there's gonna be damage to the roads.
Okay.
But I'm not
Traffic
against
and
the solar
damage.
farm at all.
No,
I just wondered,
Okay, can you see the property from your residence?
not from my residence,
Okay.
no.
All right, I'm going to agree with Attorney Fox that I don't see you as having standing. However, I would ask the applicant to address the concerns that Ms. Aborgast has raised tonight in your testimony. Would you be willing to do that?
absolutely. And if it's okay, Ms. Aborgast, if we're going through something, is it okay if she raises her hand, and we want to make sure we answer everything all at once?
Sure, we can do that. Again, I
Sure, I
want to
don't
be
wanna-
careful about the formality of party status, but if you're willing to be somewhat informal in order to make sure that her concerns are answered, we can cooperate with that. Is there anyone else here tonight who wishes to be considered as a party to this matter? No? Okay. Since we are allowing questions, sir, do you have anything that you would like the applicant to address?
Not at this time.
All right. Okay, fine. So, with that being said, we've identified the applicant will be the sole party here tonight. I want to also announce that anyone who offers evidence tonight will be required to be sworn. And we also have some information put into the record about the preparation for tonight's hearing. Public notice of this hearing was duly advertised in the Daily Local on November 7 and November 14, 2024. Adjoining property owners were notified by mail of this hearing on November 7, 2024. Notice of this hearing was posted on the property by Matt Foster, zoning officer, on November 14, 2024. At this time, the board offers the following exhibits into evidence. Board Exhibit 1 would be the application of Sincarfa Honey Brook LLC on behalf of Sincarfa Solar CF2 LLC for the property located at 37 Dampman Road, Honey Brook Township, Chester County, Pennsylvania. Board Exhibit 2 would be a copy of the notice of tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is a proof of publication of the notice of the hearing in the Daily Local. Board Exhibit 4 is an affidavit of service by mail for those individuals who received notice of this hearing by mail. Board Exhibit 5 is an affidavit of the posting of the notice on the property. Board Exhibit 6 is a letter of the Board of Supervisors of Honey Brook Township dated November 14, 2024, taking the position of support on the variance requests from Section 27-1702 and Section 27-1703A6 of the zoning ordinance. And Board Exhibit 7 is a copy of the Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance as amended. Is there any objection to any of those board exhibits?
None.
Thank you. With that, we have completed our administrative actions at the beginning of the hearing, and I'm going to turn this over to Attorney Fox to present his witnesses. And you had previously asked about swearing in. I would recommend we swear both of your witnesses right away so that they can, obviously we'll testify one at a time, but if they need to back each other up, they'll both be sworn. So please, gentlemen, if you would allow yourselves to be sworn by the stenographer.
Swear or affirm the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please answer I do. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Atty. Fox, I'm the attorney for the applicant. If I may, I'll do a summary of our application. And admittedly, this is somewhat of a unique position. We don't often get a letter of support from the Board of Supervisors for variance relief, and we had the same support from the Planning Commission when we presented the application. As referenced, the property is located at 37 Dampman Road, which is the the existing northwestern Chester County Municipal Authority facility. It's bearing tax parcel 22-8-8.3-E. The entire property is 65.7 acres, located in A agricultural zoning district. My client, as you hear from Mr. Cohen, is in the business of developing solar facilities. I believe we're the first solar facility that's presented an application in Honey Brook Township to the zoning hearing board. So what a solar facility is, and what you'll hear from Mr. Cohen, it's one of the few passive uses of land once it's constructed. The facility is comprised of a security fence, a racking on which the panels sit, a road for ingress and egress, and some interconnection equipment to the local electric utility, as well as a transformer and what are called inverters, and I'll have Mr. Cohen explain that. But once the facility's in, it doesn't generate traffic, it doesn't bring additional people to the municipality, other than a maintenance crew, which is typically a landscape crew that'll come in and mow. There really isn't any impact. Solar is also unique in that the DEP treats solar panels as pervious, because unlike a parking lot where rainwater can gather, accelerate, and run off, the solar panels are arranged in such a way that water collects on one array of solar panels and runs into the ground immediately under the panel below it. And interestingly, the zoning ordinance calls out an impervious coverage requirement for solar panels. However, in the township subdivision land development ordinance, solar panels are specifically exempted. I understand this board doesn't have jurisdiction over the SALDO, but it's something we'll talk about a little bit further in testimony this evening. As you heard from your solicitor, we're asking for relief in the alternative. First, dealing with the impervious coverage from section 27-17036. Our total facility will have an impervious coverage of 10.7%. In light of the way that the SALDO treats impervious, we're going to talk about whether an interpretation is appropriate that the solar panels would not be considered impervious. However, alternatively, section 1053 of the Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance, specifically, in this part, I'll give you a subsection here if I can call it out. If the solar facility is considered a principal use, and solar energy systems at 1053 D1 subsection B, that are read verbatim from the ordinance, notwithstanding lot coverage limitations set forth in the base zoning district, the maximum impervious surface coverage for a principal solar energy system and any accessory appurtenant structures shall be 20% of the gross lot area. So if it's determined that the panels are pervious, consistent with the SALDO, we wouldn't need the impervious coverage, but I think the ordinance speaks to if this is a principal use, I don't know that we need the impervious variance, so perhaps that relief could be disposed of. As for a second count of relief, we asked for relief from section 27-1702 to permit two principal uses on the property, or in the alternative, a determination that a solar power generation facility is accessory to the current sewage treatment plant use. This is largely in part because the solar doesn't have employees, doesn't have folks, and looking at the property and the use, I'm unable to define which would be the principal use, or if the solar facility should be considered the principal or accessory use. Now, I will note there are some issues with an accessory solar facility because it only contemplates certain types of net metering within the ordinance. This is a net metering project, and I'll have Mr. Cohen explain what that is, but it's different than that which is contemplated in the ordinance. Your ordinance talks about net metering that's either serving a property directly, or there's remote net metering where the facility is located off-site but still serves a specific property. I don't know that the zoning ordinance itself contemplates net metering as proposed here. Are there any questions from me before I
Where is the 20% coverage limitation that you referred to?
And yeah, I'm gonna hand a package of exhibits in, I should have done that initially. So I'm at section 271053 and subsection D, speaking to solar facilities as a principal use.
Okay, I'm ready.
So D1, B, is notwithstanding the base. And if that determination were made, that we elect to pursue a principal use for the property and prefer the alternative relief to consider it an accessory use.
Well, let me tell you some questions I have, and I know you haven't presented your testimony, but the panels are not going to be owned by the authority, is that correct? They're going to be owned by Cindy Carford, that's why you have a lease agreement, correct? So, yeah, use words, say yes. Okay. So the primary purpose of these solar panels is to generate electricity to be put on the grid of the community. The primary purpose is not to replace an existing energy supply for the operation of the sewage treatment plant, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
The witness needs to identify himself.
okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Cohn, can you?
Steve Rodgers.
Spell your
Yes.
name.
C-O-H-N.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Interrupt me anytime you need something. Thank you. My thought on this is that if the panels were owned by the authority and were primarily for the purpose of providing energy resources to operate the sewage treatment plant, that this would clearly be an accessory solar project. But the way that this is, as I understand it so far, being operated, it's to generate a lot more energy, and it's not owned by the authority. So to me, this looks like a principal use. Is there any reason, is there any information you could provide to persuade me why this should be considered an accessory use, other than the fact that, well, I don't know what, give me your argument. Why could we consider it an accessory use?
So typically when I think of a primary use versus an accessory use, the primary use is the more involved, the more intense use of the property. The sewer authority has activities going on, there are employees that come and go. Such is not the case, or to a much lesser degree with the solar facility. But in light of some of the other constraints of the ordinance, we're perfectly fine proceeding with the principal use designation, and a lot of the argument speaks to the impact of a use variance on this property or the surrounding community, and that there really, once completed, there really won't be any impacts. So if it's your opinion or the opinion of the zoning hearing board that this must be required to pursue a principal use, we're perfectly fine proceeding with it.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know does the board have any questions about this line of discussion that we're having?
If you're going to be leasing this land from the sewer authority, how long is your lease?
The lease is for an initial 20 years. It also includes the option for us to extend it for 3 additional 5-year periods. So it could run to 35 years.
Another thing I'd like you to address is that I know what the application talks about is a second principal use, which is clearly a requirement under section 1702 of the zoning ordinance, one principal use per property. But it's also true that solar farm as a principal use is not a permitted use in the zoning district. So I think the use variance.
Use variance.
Yeah, that's right. So there's really two aspects to the use variance. One is to have a second principal use, but also that the use is not allowed in the zoning district as a principal use. And that doesn't trouble me to the extent that we advertise for variances, so there's notice in the community that the standard that we're going to apply is the one that applies to variances. But I think just to get that on the record, I think you should consider stating that as part of the relief you're seeking. In addition to that, there was an issue that came up during the preparation of the advertising for this, that it might have come out of the planning commission meeting, with the actual amount of impervious. I think the application said 10.7%, but the planning commission might have discussed that it's actually 10.8% that's needed. I don't know if that rings a bell with you, but that is something I have in my notes that I was going to ask you to amend your application tonight to clarify that the amount of impervious is 10.8, not 10.7. Does that ring a bell with you?
Mr. Sesco, could I have you review the plan and confirm the percentage of impervious coverage?
Yeah, if I could move this over here.
And would you identify yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Chris Sespico. I work for JHA Companies. I'm a professional civil engineer.
Can you spell your last name, please?
Sure, S-E-S-P-I-C-O. So what you can probably see from where you are is the hatching pattern, which is the panels. And the proposed percentage that the hatching pattern in the panels, we have is 10.8% on the plans.
Okay.
And would that be the total impervious coverage of the property once it's complete, or is that just the panels themselves?
That's just the panels themselves.
So the question I would have, at the end of the 20-year lease, say Honey Brook grows exponentially like it has in the last 20 years, and they say we need that land for more lagoons, then what happens to the solar field?
So, yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, the installation of a solar field is a pretty non-permanent installation. There are panels that are on a racking system, and that racking system is direct piled into the ground. Exactly how we do it is still subject to moving into the geotech, and we're gonna evaluate the crop land, or what's in the ground, and do a windland study as well. But generally speaking, it's a non-permanent installation. So at the end of the lease, we are able to restore the property pretty much to its original condition.
And if I may, you're actually financially obligated to under the term of your lease, correct?
This is true. We actually, our lease obligates us to place a bond with our property owner to ensure that there's money there when that time comes.
And that bond is to secure the duty to remove the solar panels and the racking, is that correct?
This is correct.
And, I have some exhibits I wanted to hand out. So if we could consider this applicant's exhibit package, it's tab 1 through 9. So tab number 1, if we call that A1, is the zoning hearing board application, which includes the deed and a redacted copy of the lease. Tab number 2 is the zoning hearing board plan as submitted. We'll call that A2. Tab number 3 is the zoning hearing board plan with a existing sewer easement, which had come up in due diligence between the time we had filed the application and tonight's hearing. So we'll walk through the overall scope of the project may be slightly reduced, or at worst, the panels may be configured inside of the proposed fence line area, depending upon what our findings are related to the easement. Tab number 4, for reference, is section 1702 of the Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance, and we apologize, with apologies if this is duplicative, as the ordinance is put in as an exhibit. Tab number 5 is section 1703 of the Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance. Tab number 6 is section 1053 of the Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance, which references renewable energy systems and the performance standards. We're going to talk about primary as a primary use this evening. Section 8, or sorry, tab 8 is, I didn't want to submit the entirety of the definition section of the SALDO ordinance, but specifically section 202, which defines impervious surface, and in the last sentence specifically excludes solar panels from the definition of impervious surface for SALDO. And in tab number 9, we have example aerial project photographs of completed Sincarfa capital solar facilities. These are larger in scale, but they're provided for reference so you can see what a finished solar facility may look like. Exhibit 9, tab A, is project in Millbury, New Jersey. Tab B is Sincarfa and Northbridge. Tab C is Westminster, and tab D is Westminster 1. I believe those are related facilities, correct? Correct. So if there are no further questions, I'll begin Mr. Cohen's testimony.
So go ahead.
So, Mr. Cohen, can you please restate the full name for the board?
Stephen Cohen.
And what is your position with Sincarfa Capital, specifically as related to Sincarfa Honey Brook?
My title is project developer for Sincarfa.
And what are your responsibilities and experience in renewable energy, specifically with solar development with Sincarfa?
I've been working in solar for about 2 years. I have, in the area, I am currently involved in developing around 15 projects of similar size type projects in several municipalities around Pennsylvania and several counties in Delaware. Also some rooftop installations, not quite as similar to this in New Jersey under the New Jersey Community Solar Program.
And you are familiar with this property and the surrounding neighborhood?
Yeah.
And why is this property attractive to Sincarfa Capital for a solar facility?
It's attractive for a few reasons. One is the existing infrastructure that is there. There's already three-phase lines running to the property, running right onto the property, and linking us to a substation about 4 miles away. And the property is, the current use on the property is being farmed right now, but it's adjacent to a commercial use. So I'm not sure about it.
No, that's right. So in order for a property to be viable for solar, you have to be near an electrical grid interconnection point. Is that fair?
This is correct.
And what does that mean? Is that a substation? Do you have to have a certain type of electric lines near the property?
Optimally, you want to be near three-phase lines. Three-phase lines, you can identify them if you're not familiar, but they tend to be the pole, usually they have a crossbar, but there's literally 3 lines and you can see them now. That's primarily what where you want to start. The closer you can get to a substation, the better. This one's not particularly close to the substation, but close enough that the upgrades aren't too difficult.
So before we talk about the specific facility, we talk about the interconnection process. So you have an agreement with the local utility company?
Yes, we have an agreement in place with PPL. We've applied for interconnection, and they have, they've done an initial study. They're going to do a more elaborate engineering study, but we have an agreement in place with them to interconnect in a timeline, and an agreement for them to take the power.
And if you get approvals on this project, PPL has to take the power from the facility, correct?
Correct.
And then as far as the interconnection, PPL provides you a scope of work and there are specifications and standards for what has to be done for interconnection, correct?
That's correct.
And does PPL do the work or does Sincarfa Capital do the interconnection work?
Well, PP&L will be doing some upgrades to their infrastructure. And PP&L will be conducting that work. Part of the agreement we have with PP&L is that we actually finance that. We pay for those upgrades. But PP&L themselves do the work. Everything to the interconnection point is PP&L's, and everything leading to that interconnection point will be constructed by SALDO.
So one of the immediate benefits to the local community then is there will be some upgrades to the local infrastructure that are borne by Sincarfa Capital, correct?
That is correct.
And as far as a specific interconnection point, that will be determined by PP&L, correct?
Yes.
And that will be done some point during either when we're in the land development process or shortly thereafter, is that correct?
That's correct.
So as far as one cleanup item, I forgot, I'm sorry I didn't ask you. So the applicant here was Sincarfa Honey Brook, but the tenant under the lease is Sincarfa Solar CF2 LLC. Can you explain the relationship and confirm that those are related entities?
They are, effectively Sincarfa CF2 has assigned the lease to Sincarfa Honey Brook LLC. Both are subsidiaries of Sincarfa Capital.
And then as to the facility, is it fair that there will be no batteries installed on site?
There will not be batteries installed on site.
And so, in other words, all of the electricity produced by the solar panels goes directly into the grid. It will not be stored on the property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you heard me describe the project in general. Was I correct in my description?
Yes.
And as far as the security fence, we in this municipality proposing an 8-foot tall security fence. Is that fair? Whatever meets the ordinance is what will be installed.
Yes.
And we're not asking for any relief from any buffering requirements as may be required in the zoning or land development ordinance.
That's correct.
Can I turn your attention to Exhibit A3, which you heard me reference a sewer easement on the property. Can you explain how this came about? Correct my description that it came about during due diligence between application and filing and tonight?
Yeah, that's correct. There are two lines that run alongside each other, indicated in this exhibit, and that was drawn out for us by the municipal authority. These did not turn up in survey or on a preliminary one call we did prior to survey, so we didn't know about it until they heard about us.
And so the area in red on Exhibit A2, that's the sewer line easement, correct?
That's roughly the sewer line easement. We will have to have survey go back out and pinpoint it, and we have to work with the sewer authority to help make sure that we properly locate it. But that's the approximate location.
So, and this drawing also has the same fence line as Exhibit A2, which is the plan behind me, which is shown in red. Will that fence line change in any way?
No.
So that's the area that the solar facility will be located in, correct?
Correct.
So if this requires removal of or reconfiguration of the panels, would the same number of panels roughly be redistributed throughout the facility if possible?
If possible, yes.
But in no event would we go above the requested 10.8 impervious coverage if panels are deemed pervious?
No, we would not go with that.
And forgive me, Mr. Hartman, the reason I'm asking you these questions are assuming if we were to get approval, it would be that estimate or the land development plan would be substantially consistent with what's being presented this evening. We're trying to avoid a trip back to amend the plan unnecessarily, but hopefully that's sufficient.
We understand, thank you.
Thank you. So, you heard me talk about the lack of impacts to solar. Is that a fair description as far as no traffic or other impacts you don't see from a more intense use of property?
That's correct. It's an unmanned facility. It's monitored remotely, both by Sincarfa and by PP&L. Visits are minimal. We would maybe have And during the growing season, we will have someone come out to make sure the grass isn't too high. So mowing services. So I would estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 visits to the site per year. And nothing large, like, that work, once it's constructed, it would be something, the size of a pickup truck on that.
So from, and forgive me if I get your name wrong, Ms. Aborgast, but to Ms. Aborgast's question, once the facility is complete, it's really only maintenance trucks that are coming in, correct?
Understood.
Correct. So now, Steve, about construction, can you walk through a construction timeline of what that, we have to go through land development, but assuming we get land development approvals, what's the construction sequence and timing, from the time you start moving dirt until the facility is 100% complete, and we can drill down a little bit in each if needed?
Sure. I mean, roughly, it takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 months to get to mechanical completion, and that means everything's in place, it's physically there. There's usually another couple of months involved in working with the DP&L for the actual interconnection process, but the heavy lifting is done by that point.
So in that 8 to 10 months of mechanical construction, does that include earth movement, if any, or is that really the installing the racking and the panels and the transformer, inverters, things like that?
Well, this project should have very little earth movement, so it's largely, the racking, the placement of the panels, and, the inverters and the
Transformer?
The transformer, sorry.
So, now, the panels themselves will have to come in on a larger truck, is that correct?
That's right.
And if we go through the land development process, we'll have to determine a point of access and a construction sequence. Is that a fair understanding?
Yes.
And if there are restrictions or things like that on township roads, that's something we obviously have to address and deal with so that we have safe access to the site. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's something you would expect to do during the land development approval process to make sure we do have safe access along township roads if need be, correct?
That is correct.
Now, if I can turn your attention, does our plan, I believe, to orient folks, and this is Exhibit A2. So these are the sewer facility lagoons, the sewer authority lagoons, the existing municipal authority building. The equipment pad, is that in the center of the field? Is that where the proposed transformer will be located?
That's correct.
And as Mr. Serpico mentioned, the hatched areas, those are the panels. The white space in between, that's grass, correct? There's a circulation road depicted roughly from the front driveway of the authority building going back through the middle. Will that be crushed stone? Or it's not intended, is that intended to be paved?
I think it's going to be crushed stone. I will point out, this portion right here is actually, there's a great deal of compressor. I think at one point there was crushed stone there, and the sewer authority does intend to do this improvement portion as well.
Okay. So the transformer is intended to be here. As far as noise or from the facilities, the transformer, what would make the noise at the facility?
You have transformers and you also have inverters throughout the system. Both make about the same amount of noise, and that amount of noise is on par with like a window air conditioning unit, something along those lines. And these transformers were pretty commonplace. We see them behind a lot of commercial buildings and things like that.
And that noise is only occurring when solar energy is being collected and converted into electricity.
That's right. Yes.
So that would only be during the daytime?
Correct.
And that noise level you referenced as a window unit air conditioner, is that at the property line, or this is not something folks are going to hear from, quarter mile away?
Keep in mind that, if that's in the center of the unit, and also keep in mind there's 100-foot setbacks all around, the noise levels should be pretty minimal.
And you mentioned mowing and mowing schedule. You're also incentivized to keep the grass low so that there's no shade or shadow on the panels, is that correct?
That's correct. If it gets too high, yeah, it throws shade on panels.
So, and then as far as some of the performance standards that we're required to cover, I'll cover some of these with Mr. Sesvico, but will you seek the necessary building and zoning permits consistent with either independent of Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code prior to construction?
Yes.
Will Sincarfa provide manufacturer specifications to the township on any equipment when applying for a permit?
Yes.
Will the design and installation of the solar facility conform to applicable industry standards such as those of the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, Underwriters Laboratories, the American Society for Testing and Materials, for an ASTM brand, or other similar certifying organizations, and comply with the Township Building Code and with all other applicable fire and life safety requirements?
Yes.
Sorry for the compound question. Will Sincarfa provide the township with written authorization from the local utility company, PP&L, acknowledging and approving such connection?
Yes.
And you have that in hand today, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, not physically.
Yeah, I don't physically have it with me yet. Yes, we have it.
And where feasible, will all power transmission lines be placed underground?
Yes, keeping in mind, as I mentioned before, Sincarfa's portion of the installation intends to be underground. What PP&L does is mostly existing and will remain above ground.
So beyond PP&L specifications, roughly if it's on site, that will be underground.
Yes.
And then will all mechanical equipment placement comply with accessory setbacks for the A agricultural zoning district?
Yes.
So it's in the middle and well outside of the 100-foot setback, correct?
Yes.
And will the solar facility contain any hazardous substances as defined in the Pennsylvania Hazardous Sites Cleanup Act?
Will it contain it? No,
Yeah.
there will not be any.
And again, the panels themselves are made up of silicone and aluminum effectively, correct?
Polysilicon and yeah, basically aluminum frames. Yeah.
So there's nothing toxic in the
There
panels
is nothing
themselves.
toxic.
Will the solar facility be artificially lit in any way?
No.
Alternatively, if the township requires it for a safety standard, if they require a security light of some kind, will there be an objection?
No.
And we could discuss that during the land development process.
Yes.
And then will the solar facility refrain from displaying any advertising signs?
There will be no advertising.
Will the solar facility provide a reasonable identification of the panel or other equipment manufacturer, as well as contact information for the facility owner?
Yes.
And then, does this property have a means of vehicular access from public or private streets?
Yes.
Is that the gravel access road you and I referenced previously?
Yeah, it'll come through the entrance off of Hampton Road and then go back to the gravel area we just assessed.
There's some performance standards regarding glare. Before we discuss those, could I show you some exhibits that we have marked as Exhibit 89? This is Exhibit A, we're calling the Millbury area. This is an existing Sincarfa facility.
It is.
And one difference of this facility, it does have batteries on site, correct?
That's correct. The series of cabinets that you see in the front and the forefronts on the right-hand side of the closest array, that won't be included in
And this is a much larger facility, it seems, than what is proposed here, or at least a bit larger.
Yeah, it's much larger. This is, I can't remember if this is 5 or 7 megawatts versus 2.
In our previous discussion, you mentioned that the panels are coated with the anti-glare coating, is that right?
That's correct.
And looks to me that this picture is taken in direct sunlight. It does not appear to be any glare at this facility. And then I'm going to show you Exhibit Exhibit 9B, the South Northridge aerial. Again, this is a larger facility. Again, taken in direct sunlight, but it does look like there are some small pockets of at least muted glare. Is this what, looks to be about the worst case?
That's probably, yeah, really direct sunlight.
And on this property, from visits to the property, are there any, would you see any property owners that would be potentially be impacted by any glare to the extent of occur?
It's mostly, it's farmland surrounding, so I don't think so, no.
And then tab 9C, this is the Westminster area. And this one, similar again, different, there's battery cabinets on the top left side of the facility, but it's nearby an adjacent residential home, correct? And again, this appear to be a well-lit period of the day. I do see any glare on the panels themselves. And lastly, Exhibit 9B, Westminster Area 1. Again, I guess the difference is there are battery cabinets on the left-hand side, but the same question, does there appear to be any glare during the bright portion of the day? And is it your expectation, based on your experience and review of other park projects, that the same will hold true, that if there is any glare, it's extremely limited? And that's also based on panels being anti-glare coated. So will the panels be installed in a way then to prevent glare?
Yes.
And then will the solar facility be placed so that we can make sure that any glare will be directed away from adjacent properties or roadways?
Well,
And that's from an ordinance question.
yeah,
but
I want to make sure we're clarifying one thing. This, to make this project a more efficient project, this will be installed on tractors. And so what that means is that the panels will follow the sun through the morning sky. That allows us to generate more power that way. So they'll basically follow the sun.
And how much rotation would be on those trackers? It's going to be, are they going to be completely vertical, or is it a matter of degrees? So 45 degrees or less rotation?
I would say 45 degrees in either direction, straight up there.
And again, the panels themselves have the anti-glare coating.
They did.
And to the extent we can't use existing buffering, we're not seeking any relief from the buffering requirements of either the zoning ordinance or the subdivision land development ordinance, correct? So buffering would be a way to mitigate glare to the extent there would be any, is that correct? Now, also required by the ordinance, will the installer or manufacturer of the solar energy system submit the required signed statement required under section 27-1053 of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And as to the installers themselves, not just anybody can be a solar installer in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
That's correct.
There's a robust DEP certification required, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And is it fair to say then Sincarfa would only use a DEP permitted solar installer before the installation of this facility?
Yes.
Also required in the ordinance, is it fair to say that the solar facility is not within 100 feet of a historic structure?
Yes.
And does this solar energy system rely on the adjacent properties for access?
No.
So no easements otherwise are necessary for access. It's right on the Dampton Road through the existing property.
That's correct.
And as far as setbacks, does the solar energy facility meet all the required setbacks and size requirements for ground-mounted solar energy system?
Yes.
And you testified to this a bit earlier, but will Sincarfa remove the solar energy system within 6 months of it becoming abandoned?
Yes.
And there is a bond required under the lease, correct?
Yes.
And is there any objection to presenting the township with a copy of that bond for their review during the land development process to ensure that there's sufficient security in place?
There's no objection to that, no.
And if and when the solar energy system is removed, with some carpet debris, or receive any earth disturbance that occurs as a result of that removal. And is there anything else you'd like to add or felt we should have covered?
No, I brought up the tractors, and we talked a little bit about the noise. The tractor motors themselves make a very similar noise, pretty much imperceptible from 50 feet away. So, again, don't add to any kind of noise criteria.
Does the board have any questions of Mr. Cohen?
Will there be a lot of traffic during construction in particular?
There will be some traffic. I mean, some equipment's going to have to be brought back there, and some equipment to put the racking in the ground, and also to bring the racking and the panels back there. So there will be some during construction.
Will the racks be, will they have a footer, or will they simply be pounded into the ground?
Pretty much the second thing. They'll be pounded into the ground. There will be a little bit of design work around that. And again, I mentioned one of the pieces we will do before we go to land development is we'll conduct geotech. We're basically in a couple of places on the property, take a core sampling of the ground and see how deep we have to go and what the dirt's actually made of, and come up with the final design. That we also take into account wind load as well, and we'll determine exactly the way. Sometimes we put ground screws at the bottom of them, but it should be it's pretty much a direct pile driven into the ground.
Will there be any grading done at the site to prepare for the installation of?
We don't anticipate grading this week.
So you also will not be bringing soil in or removing soil from the site?
I'm not, I mean, no, I guess not. With the pile driven in, we wouldn't be digging much anything.
Okay. So with regard to traffic, we understand there will be vehicles bringing in equipment and materials during the several-month construction period. If there is any damage to the roads, will SINCARF take responsibility for that? And again, this may very well be a land development-related issue, but I just wanted to hear you say what your thoughts are on responsibility for road damage during this temporary construction period.
Yeah, I would hold some part accountable for that, yes.
And my client would be happy if that's a condition of approval as well. And it's more than fair.
I want to ask Ms. Aborgast if her questions have yet been answered, or is there another way that I should ask your questions to get more information from the witness?
I appreciate that. I just wanted, just kind of get an idea of what traffic will look like. Like, is the trucks just gonna come up once, huge trucks with the solar panels, will they be coming through probably just for like a week to get them delivered, or is that gonna be, what is it gonna look like on a normal day for 6 to 8 months?
I'm not sure I have the right answer to that question. It would more than likely, it'll probably be done in some level of phases. So, the racking will go in first. First there'll be the equipment to drive in the racking, and then the racking itself. I would imagine the racking will get placed, and then there'll probably be another little wave of vehicles bringing back the panels.
I'm sure you guys are gonna be cognizant of safety with kids and buses and,
Oh, of course.
and different traffic, so that's all. I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what it was gonna look like, so, thank you.
Thank you.
I would just comment, and this is kind of off the record, I would say, if you have issues during that period of time, don't be afraid to call the township office and share your concerns, because you're out there and you are the eyes and ears of the community, so don't be afraid to communicate with the township about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There is a lot of kids that are riding around on their bikes and scooters and bus stops and people walking and stuff, so I'm sure they will be well aware of that. So thank you guys.
All right, thank you. And the other gentleman in the audience, is there anything you would like us to ask about?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead.
Mr. Cohen is here if you have any other questions related to his area of testimony. I'd like to introduce Chris Sespico. Chris, could you please state your full name and professional background for the board?
Sure. First of all, Christopher Paul Sespico. Professional background is been working in the area of civil engineering for 25 years. 24 long, 25 years. I've been licensed since 2007.
And have you testified before zoning hearing boards and governing bodies as an expert in civil engineering?
I am not.
Well, with your experience, though, are you familiar with Honey Brook Township zoning ordinance and have designed and development plans in your professional background?
Yes.
Are there any objections if I introduce Mr. Sespico as an expert in the field of civil engineering for tonight's proceeding?
You're a licensed professional engineer in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long have you been practicing in Pennsylvania?
Since 2007.
And you've done many land development plans during that time?
Correct.
And
I've done many zoning plans as well as some development submissions for.
And when you prepare land development plans, you look through the zoning regulations and make sure those plans comply with applicable zoning requirements, is that correct?
Correct.
I'm satisfied to admit him as an expert in civil engineering. Is that acceptable to the board?
Yes.
All right, very good. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chris. So could I ask you to walk up to the plan? And you heard me give a lay summary, but could you go top to bottom, highlight the setback, 100-foot setback to the fence line, and call out the blue lines, which I believe are the intended stormwater facilities?
Correct. So I'll back up here. This is the outer boundary of the parcel. Again, we mentioned this was the panel area in hatched. The blue lines, as Mr. Fox is referencing, are designed stormwater infiltration trenches, which will capture, infiltrate stormwater into the ground, as well as allow the stormwater to run over the topography in a sheet flow fashion, which is the least amount of any kind of adverse impacts, which is recommended by Pennsylvania DEP.
And forgive me, I jumped in your lane. I'm not a civil engineer, but you heard me reference that DEP treats solar panels as pervious because of the manner in which the water runs off one array directly into the ground underneath the array in front of it. Is that a fair statement? So, and that's different from, say, a parking lot or a roof where water can collect and either get discharged at a point. This is completely different, correct?
Correct.
And that's also why we're not showing or anticipating any retention basins because of the manner that water sheet flows off the panels. It's only a few stormwater trenches, correct?
Correct. And these trenches are designed to be installed at level with contour to promote that sheet flow and to be the least harmful option for the project. There is a proposed basin in the one corner of the facility, and that's designed based on the subdivision and land development ordinance requirements to make sure that we're reducing the amount of flow going off the site than what is there today.
And to contrast, agriculture is largely exempted from E&S controls, correct, from a DEP standpoint?
Typically, if it's used as an agricultural use.
So if this facility is approved, it's currently being used as agriculture, but there will be more control of stormwater today. I'm sorry, if the plan is developed and exists today, correct?
Correct. Chapter 102 of the PA code requires the on-site ENS and stormwater controls to comply with any other type of commercial facility.
And those trenches, would they be considered BMPs? And certainly if there's a basin, that's a BMP necessitating a recorded stormwater operations and maintenance agreement, correct?
That's correct.
So the land, in this case, the tenant, would be required to maintain those at the schedule required by the DEP or pursuant to the maintenance schedule shown on the ENS plan.
That is correct.
And that's recorded against the property following land development, correct? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You keep walking through the plan.
No worries. So you'll see a buffer where there's no proposed panels to be installed around here, which is complying with the 100-yard setback from the property line.
100 foot?
100 foot.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, 100 feet. So, I don't know if you want me to go over anything else.
Sure. So you heard Steve talk about where the equipment pad is. Are there any other equipment pads proposed on site?
No.
And the gravel access, it looks like there's a couple of turnarounds or T-turns where larger vehicles could make it. Would that be a K-turn to reorient themselves and get out?
Yeah, just for the vehicles, just to be able to safely maneuver around the site for trafficability purposes.
And you heard Mr. Cohn's testimony related to the sewer easement. If the sewer easement were to require panels to be reallocated, in no event would they be within a 100-foot setback, correct?
That's correct.
And in no event would that reallocation of any panels go above the proposed 10.8 impervious surface coverage, correct?
That's correct.
And sorry if this sounds like a stupid question, but you heard me reference earlier that the specific performance standards for a solar facility can be up to 20% impervious coverage under section 1053 of the township ordinances. It's 10.8%, obviously less than the 20%.
Last I checked, yes.
So if that were the controlling standard, we would not need an impervious surface variance, correct?
Correct.
But in no event would we propose more than 10.8% impervious for the panels, correct?
That's correct.
What is the area in acres of the panel coverage?
The area in acres is 5.6 acres.
Of panels. So according to the ordinance, the maximum area occupied by the solar facility is 10 acres, so we're below that threshold, correct?
Correct.
And you testified this, I believe, but will the solar facility be set back a minimum of 100 feet from any public right-of-way, lot line, or historic structure?
Yes.
And it's even more than 100 feet from the right-of-way, correct?
That's correct.
Will there be an 8-foot high fence and self-locking gate surrounding the panels, preventing unauthorized people or vehicles from entering?
There will be.
And this might be more of a question for Mr. Coe, but is it routine to provide a Knox box or some access for local emergency services if required during the land development process?
I believe it's typical.
And we heard Mr. Coe testify this, but there's also your experience that the fence would have warning signs warning people about potential voltage hazards.
Yes.
And those would be depicted in the land development submission for review following zoning approval.
Correct.
Do these panel clusters as shown contain at least an 8-foot drive aisle?
In between the panels?
In between the panels,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, it's a 10-foot.
10-foot drive aisle. And will there be DC, AC inverters installed in each cluster with an automatic disconnect device? And if that's more of a question for Mr. Cohen, I can pivot that back to him, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to defer to Mr. Cohen.
That is
I'm
correct,
sorry to
yes.
ask you, thank you, Mr. Jessica. So, Steve, just to confirm a couple other things related to the ordinance, you did testify to this, but the solar energy facility does not include any co-location of batteries or equipment used to store energy, is that correct?
Correct.
And also, we're required to provide adequate water supply for firefighting purposes. Is there adequate water supply at this property?
The sewer authority has a well water system that's available to us.
And you believe that that will be sufficient, and we can work with the sewer authority to make sure it's sufficient, correct? So thank you. I have no further questions for you gentlemen. Like to ask the board if they have any questions for Mr. Sespico, and I have a brief summation.
You are fortunate to have the recommendation of the township for the approval of the release of the site, but I would still appreciate you assisting us in articulating a decision which could reference a hardship. Have you something you can help us to comply with that standard for the use variance and the second principal use variance that are required for this approval?
Sure. So while use variance has a more difficult burden than articulated in the Hertzberg case for dimensional variances, you don't have to show that the property is entirely valueless if the use variance is not granted. However, this is a very unique property in that it's the existing property of a municipal authority. It's uniquely shaped. It's unattractive really for any other use other than agriculture due to access, the existing use on the property, and functionally, other than this use, which if this were considered an accessory use, this is a permitted use then in the A agricultural zoning district. So coupled with the lack of impacts from solar, and that it's a use that coexists complementary with a municipal authority. I think if you look at the unique shape of the property, its lack of access, it's really not usable for anything other than this specific use or otherwise the current agricultural use of the property.
Okay, that's the best we have. We'll take that. Any questions from the board for either witness or anything? Have you given us your summary yet, or?
I was going to give you you took some of the thunder away, but that's all right.
Well, why don't you give us your summary?
Sure. So thank you for having us this evening. As Mr. Hartman referenced, we're in somewhat a unique position, having the support of the planning commission and the board of supervisors, which typically the best we hope for is no position taken by the governing body. I think if you look at the intent of the agricultural zoning district, what's intended there are uses of land that don't impact the surrounding community in a material way. I think this use does just that. Now, if this were couched as an accessory use of the property, we wouldn't be here. But for it being a second principal use or necessitating a use variance, we have to be here to request relief from you gentlemen. I'm hopeful what we heard this evening is testimony of a responsible solar developer, somebody that wants to be part of the community and be a good neighbor and comply in all other respects regarding the zoning ordinance and throughout the land development process and work with the township related to the requirements there too. In addition, one thing I was hoping in the decision regarding the impervious coverage, I think the language of section 1053 of the ordinance speaks to the impervious surface coverage variance going away. So then it just becomes a question of whether or not this use is suitable for this property and whether use variance is appropriate. And I respectfully suggest that it is, and would ask that we hopefully find favor with your application this evening. As a matter of housekeeping, I'd like to move for the admission of our exhibits.
I'd recommend to the board that we accept the exhibits that have been presented, make them part of the record. I think at this time, unless there's any additional questions from the board, that we should close the record. And at this time, I'm going to offer to the board that you have the option of deliberating here in public, or if you have any questions, you may recess into an executive session and we can discuss any questions you might have for me. What would the board like to do?
session.
All right. So if you'll just give us a few minutes, we'll be back promptly, I'm sure.
Were we loud and clear enough for you?
Yes. Thank you.
this time, and I'm going to suggest a potential motion for the board, and then if the board likes that, they can take action. And my recommended motion would be to grant the variances for a second principal use on the property and for a solar farm to be a principal use on the property. The consequence of that, in the board's opinion, is that the impervious coverage regulation applicable to the project would be that which is in the solar regulation for ground-mounted solar, and that would be 20%. Therefore, the 10.8 already complies with the impervious, and no relief is required from the impervious coverage regulation. The board wishes to impose a couple of conditions on the relief that they are granting tonight, and those conditions would be as follows: that the applicant would be responsible for road damages resulting from construction-related activity for the project on the entire length of Dampman Road and on the portion of Supplee Road from Stoltzfus Lane to Dampman Road. The board is anticipating that your construction-related traffic will be coming off of Route 322 through the township and down Supplee Road, and the portion of Supplee Road that is in a lesser condition is the portion closest to Dampman from Stoltzfus Lane to the intersection with Dampman. Further, the board wishes to expressly require bonding of the decommissioning costs for removal of the solar project at the end of its useful life, and that condition should be satisfied during the land development process with the township. Third, the applicant would be required to comply with all other applicable township regulations and obtain all necessary permits for the project. And fourth, that the applicant would be required to comply with its testimony, understanding that minor deviations from the plans that were supplied at the hearing tonight might occur during the land development planning process. That is my recommended motion for the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you have any questions about the board's decision?
No, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you hearing us this evening.
Very good. Well, good luck with your project. And as you know, the board has a duty to issue a written decision, and that written decision will be issued in 45 days. And I'm hoping if my associate, Mr. Fessler, is prompt in his efforts, it'll come out sooner than that. But in any event, when you receive a written decision, if you're dissatisfied in any way, you have 30 days to appeal that decision to the Chester County Court of Common Pleas. Any other questions?
No. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are we all on the record?
Yeah, we're all
Yeah.
right.
You had to ask about hardship.